the results of being rich in fine works? Let us listen intently as our visiting speaker, Brother Splane, addresses us on the subject, Continue in Fine Works and Reap Jehovah's Blessings. Brother Splane, you have our undivided attention.
Well, if you think about the theme of our discussion this afternoon, you'll notice that there are two main ideas. Fine works and Jehovah's blessing. Continue in fine works and reap Jehovah's blessing. Now, when we think about Jehovah's blessing, if there's one text that comes to mind, it's probably what's recorded at Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 22. You might not just remember at the moment what's stated there, but when I read it, you'll recognize it. Proverbs 10 and 22. It says, "The blessing of Jehovah, that is what makes rich, and he adds no pain with it." Well, there's a text that has a bearing on our theme then. It certainly is talking about the blessing of Jehovah. Now, a question arises, in what way does the blessing of Jehovah make rich? Does it mean that if we're being blessed by Jehovah, that our bank account, our bottom line, is going to be very healthy? That Jehovah is going to bless us in material ways? Well, if you've lost your job recently, or if you lost money in the stock market, you might have reason to question that interpretation. But that is the construction that many in Christendom place on these words. Very often, in order to encourage people to give more, to donate more, Christendom will say that if you give till it hurts, then you're going to be blessed by the Lord. And how will he bless you? Well, he'll give you more money. That's the attitude they take. But that is not the meaning of these words. When it says that the blessing of Jehovah makes us rich, what it means is that the blessing of Jehovah will make us happy. The blessing of Jehovah will make us happy. The rich are not always happy. Now, if you were at Tacoma this year, you might have heard this experience. Even if you did, I'm going to tell it to you again. It's one I heard in Chicago this summer at the district convention. In fact, we were having supper with the brother who had the experience. He was telling us that he was the owner of a very successful graphic arts business. And he had a number of clients, but he had one very important client in particular. And one day this client phoned him up and said, "Now, we would like to have a large order of greeting cards prepared. And these greeting cards, they're for birthdays and other celebrations. And the president of our company, he's going to sign a number of these cards, and then the personnel department will send them to people on their birthdays and at Christmas time and so on. And so they'll think that they had a personal message from the president." Well, the brother said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot produce greeting cards for you for religious reasons." Well, the marketing manager said, "You really shouldn't be mixing religion and business." He says, "If you refuse this offer, you're making a big mistake." The brother said, "Ask me to make anything else, I'll be delighted, but not this." The next day, he was told that the contract, which netted him $500,000 every 6 months, was canceled. It was more than half his business. He had some debts, and he had to do something quickly to try to cover these debts. He put his house up for sale. He put his car up for sale. And that was the situation he was in when we had supper together during the convention in Chicago. And the brother was telling me, he says, Jehovah has really blessed my family. Oh, well, you sold your house. No. You sold the car. No. Well, you got back your business. Well, that made your contract. They changed their mind. No, they didn't. He said, after we lost all that business, we had about 20 employees. We had to let them go. And I had a family meeting with my 2 boys and my wife. And we decided that instead of making a desperate search for more business, we were going to try to be content with what we had. And so just my wife and I and the 2 boys, when they're not in school, we work in the business together. He says, we've cut our overhead enormously. We've cut down our expenses. We've made a few adjustments in our lifestyle. And he said the result of it is, he says, I have to admit that before, when I had this huge contract, I was spending a lot more time on my business than I should have been. And I was neglecting spiritual things. He says, I liked my business. It fascinated me. But now, he says, we spend just the amount of time that we need to on the business. We're more active in the congregation. We're more active in the field ministry. He says, Jehovah has blessed us because although we owe money, we are not worried about the future. And so, they were happy. And a man who has been blessed by Jehovah is a man who is happy. I was thinking about the brother who was on the platform here just this morning. Remember the brother who used to work 50, 60 hours a week in his construction business? And then they decided to cut their hours down to from 50, 60 to 20 every week. He doesn't look any less happy than he was before. So making an adjustment in our lifestyle does not mean making an adjustment in our happiness. It could mean the exact opposite. Now this brother and his wife, they're learning the truthfulness of the theme of our special assembly day, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18. It says, give orders to those who are rich in the present system of things, not to be high-minded, and to rest their hope not on uncertain riches. And if you put any money in Enron, you know how uncertain riches can be. But on God, who furnishes us all things richly for our enjoyment. And then in verse 18, what does he tell us to do? To work. Well, there's that word work again. We talked about that this morning. To work at good. To be rich in fine works. To be liberal, ready to share. Now you notice that last expression there, it says, to be rich in fine works. Well, there is the other part of our theme. Remember, we talked about being rich in fine works, and if we do so, it will reap Jehovah's blessing. Now, what kind of works are fine works? The opening speaker commented a little bit on fine works, what's involved. And we might say that fine works are any works that are related to true worship. Fine works are any works that are related to true worship. The opposite to fine works is dead works. And how would we define dead works? Any works that are not directly related to true worship. Any works that do not enhance our relationship with Jehovah God, do not strengthen our relationship with Jehovah God, are dead works. Now think about that for a moment. Any works that do not strengthen our relationship with Jehovah God are dead works. What does that mean? Well, it means that there are a lot of things that people do that aren't immoral or that aren't necessarily wrong in themselves, but if they don't enhance their relationship with Jehovah God, then really they are dead works. They are spiritually dead. Now, to get an example, or a few examples of what might be considered dead works from a scriptural point of view, let's turn to the president of the Dead Works Society, Solomon, in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. And let's review some of the things that Solomon was involved in. They were not immoral. They were not wrong in themselves. But as we will see, they did not enhance his spirituality. They didn't strengthen his relationship with Jehovah God. They did not gain him favor with Jehovah God. So really, they were dead works from a spiritual standpoint. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and beginning with verse 4. We're just going to skim these verses. I'm not going to read them in their entirety. Notice in verse 4 some of the things he did. He said he planted vineyards. Verse 5, he made gardens and parks. He planted fruit trees. Verse 6, he made pools of water. Verse 7, he hired people, men servants, maid servants, livestock, cattle and flocks in great quantity were his. Verse 8, he accumulated silver and gold and property peculiar to kings. And then he got to musical groups all set up. He said, I made male singers and female singers. He was interested in music, and that was the ancient equivalent of the CDs and the DVDs. And then in verse 8, he says, and I became greater and increased more than anyone that happened to be before me in Jerusalem. Imagine that. But now, what was the result of all this hard work? Verse 11. And I, even I, turned toward all the works of mine that my hands had done, and toward the hard work that I had worked hard to accomplish, and look, everything was vanity and a striving after wind. All this work, hard work, and it didn't make Solomon a happy man. So those works didn't enjoy the blessing of Jehovah, did they? Nothing wrong with them, but they just weren't making him happy. Now, why did they not make Solomon happy? We can get a little bit of a clue if we look a little bit more at these verses. Take a look at the very first word in verse 4. Now look at the first word in verse 5. Verse 6. Verse 7. Verse 8. Now the second word in verse 9. I. That was really part of the problem, wasn't it? All of these things Solomon was doing for himself. He was not doing these things for other people. And what did Jesus say? Well, what is the principle? There is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. I was thinking of the comment that Brother Overholt made this morning when he was talking about the parable of Jesus. Remember the rich man? And he got all of these storehouses, and they were just brimful, and he didn't know where to put all of his good things, and so he said, I'm going to have to tear down my storehouses and build bigger ones. Well, if the storehouses were chock full, why didn't he give a little bit away? Didn't they have any poor people in Israel who could have used, who would have appreciated a little food? A few widows? Some orphans, perhaps? He wasn't thinking about these things. He was thinking about himself. And he was not rich toward God. And so he didn't get the blessing of Jehovah. And of course, he wasn't a happy man. God didn't see any reason even to save his wife. He said, unreasonable man, this night they are demanding your soul from you. So all of these things that Solomon worked on, vineyards, fruit trees, orchards, male singers and female singers and all these other things. They may have increased Solomon's bottom line, but they did not make Solomon rich. They did not make Solomon happy. Now, in contrast, when we think of people for whom spiritual things are their life, for whom the truth is their life, who really do treasure up spiritual things, they may have very little of this world's goods, but they truly are happy people. A year or two ago, my wife and I visited the country of Venezuela. We were there for the dedication of their branch. And many of the brothers there are really very poor. Now, after the dedication was held on Saturday, and then on Sunday, there were arrangements made for special meetings to be held in two large facilities that they have in Caracas. One was a bull ring, and then there was another one that was a stadium. And so we would go morning and afternoon switch and give talks in these various stadiums. And some of the brothers came in old, broken-down school buses, 15 hours to attend that meeting. And we traveled maybe 3-4 hours to get to an assembly hall. For them, 15 hours in an old school bus. Now, as we were driving away from the assembly site for the second program, it was about 6 o'clock at night, we saw some of these school buses stopped along the road. And I asked the brothers who were driving it, I said, well, what's going on? They said, well, those buses will have broken down. They're old, rickety school buses, so they're waiting for help, somebody to come and help fix the buses. Now, the brothers had a 15-hour trip ahead of them, but the bus wasn't going anywhere. The bus was stranded on the side of the road. Were they all uptight and nervous and angry? No, they were out on the lawn. They were singing and talking and having a wonderful time. They were just so happy to be together. They have nothing, but they are so happy. So what does that mean? They are truly rich in the spiritual sense of the term. Think about Jesus. Now, there was a happy man for you. Did Jesus plant vineyards? Did he plant fruit trees? Did he assemble male singers and female singers? Did he accumulate gold and silver for himself? No, none of those things. Jesus said the Son of Man doesn't even have a place to lay his head. But Jesus was a happy man because for him, doing his Father's will was of the prime importance. He said, my food is to do the will of my Father and to finish his work. And friends, won't you agree that the times in your life when you have been the happiest are often the times in your life when you are the most active in the truth? It is a fact. I remember when we were in the traveling work in Canada, I went into a congregation and I received a notification from the presiding overseer. He said, there's a married couple that absolutely want to see you sometime this week. Their marriage is just about on the rocks, and it is very, very serious. Well, not the kind of visit that you look forward to making, but it's necessary. Wednesday night came, and the presiding overseer and I went in to visit the couple, sat down, they gave us a cup of tea, and they said, well, we really don't know, we don't have anything to talk about at this point. Well, what do you mean? 2 weeks ago, you told the presiding overseer that you absolutely had to see us. They said, that's right. But in the last 2 weeks, we've taken a lot of extra time and gone out in the field service together. And when we come home, we don't argue with one another the way we used to do. We just talk about the nice experiences that we had in the ministry. And you know, things are going a lot better for us at home. And so we kind of figured it out ourselves. We decided that if we kept just a little bit busier in the field ministry and had a few more positive things to talk about, that our marriage would go along much better. Well, now, they were thinking of other people. They were going out in the field ministry. They were trying to help other people. They were focusing a little bit less on their own problems. They were experiencing happiness. They were experiencing joy, the blessing of Jehovah. And here's the thing. They had to take the initiative. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So here's the question. Since the blessing of Jehovah makes us happy, do we feel blessed? Now you might say, I can't say that I really do. I can't really say that I feel all that happy. Well, now here's another question for you. Would you recognize a blessing if it bit you on the nose? Sometimes we are being blessed, but we don't recognize it. We don't think that we're being blessed. Sometimes we are being given a cause of great rejoicing, but we just don't see it that way. And that is what is impinging upon our happiness. So let's take a few minutes and consider 4 areas in which we do enjoy Jehovah's blessing. And they're very easy. How Jehovah blesses us as individuals, and then how he blesses us as family units. Now you take all those families and bring them together into congregations, that's the 3rd one. And then as part of Jehovah's, or of the visible part of Jehovah's organization. So, as individuals, as families, as congregations, and then as part of his visible organization. Well, what can we say about the blessing of Jehovah upon individuals? Upon what does it depend? The answer is found in Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10. Now, as we read this scripture, maybe you can think to yourself, in what way is this scripture the same as Matthew 6 and 33? Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10. It says, "Bring all the 10th parts into the storehouse, that there may come to be food in my house. And test me out, please," in this respect, Jehovah of armies has said, "whether I shall not open to you people the floodgates of the heavens, and actually empty out upon you a blessing," there's the word blessing, "until there is no more want." Now, upon what does Jehovah's blessing depend? What's the first part of verse 10? It depends upon our taking the first step. Jehovah says, you bring all of the 10th parts into the storehouse first, and then you see if I will not pour you out a blessing. So if we're going to be happy, we have to take the first step, and that requires faith on our part. It is not always easy. Now, how does that compare with Matthew 6:33? What did Jesus say there? Didn't he say, keep on seeking the kingdom, and all these other things will be added to you? No. He didn't say that. Jesus said, keep on therefore seeking first the kingdom, and then all these other things will be added to you. That means that when it comes to attending the district convention in the summer, and it means we need to have the Friday off from work, or in some cases maybe the Friday or the Saturday off from work. If we're going to expect Jehovah to bless our efforts, we have to take the initiative and go and ask the boss for time off, and then see what Jehovah God does. And if the boss says no, then maybe we have to go back another time and explain to him how very important it is for us to do that, and then see what Jehovah does. And in some cases, we may have to go back another time and explain. Sometimes, I think, if our best friend got married, and we needed time off from work for the wedding, sometimes we would be a little bit more zealous about asking for time off for that than for some other things. So if we can just imagine how important it is for us to get to that convention, and then we can communicate that to the boss. Maybe they have a policy. Maybe they say, in our company, it is impossible to get an exception. Well, Jehovah likes things that are impossible. They're a little challenge to him. And it's just wonderful to see how Jehovah is able to manipulate things so that impossible things can become possible. But do you have the faith that Jehovah is going to help you if you take the initiative? In the country of Zambia, there was a young couple who were farmers. A lot of them are farmers down there. And they had a field of corn. And in Zambia, the corn, what you receive from the corn during the year, the French word is in my mind, but not the English word, the harvest, the corn harvest, that's what you live on all year long. Now, it so happened that a district convention was organized just at the time when the harvest of corn was going to be ripe. But there's a problem with that. Because just as the ears of corn are getting ripe, the owners of the field, they're not the only ones that are looking at that corn. The crows are also looking at that corn because they want to swoop down and eat that corn as soon as it gets ripe. And so the idea is that for several weeks before the harvest time, you have to be out in the field and you have to be shushing the crows away all day. Well, the brother and his wife, they announced to the neighbors that there was a district convention coming up. They couldn't miss this district convention. It was too important. It was an invitation from Jehovah. So they were going to be away from their fields during that time. Now, were there any of the neighbors who could help them with their fields? Well, none of them could. They said, it's going to take everything we have just to shush the birds away from our fields. Well, the brother said, it doesn't matter. We're going to the convention. The neighbors said, you are crazy. Don't you realize that if we keep shushing the birds away from our fields and you're not there to shush the birds away from yours, all the birds are going to come to your field. They're going to it's going to be a disaster. Brother said, this is an invitation from Jehovah. I cannot give it up. And so they went to the convention. Now in those countries, you're walking for 3 days to the convention. Then the convention is 3 days, and it's 3 days walk back. So that meant that it was about 9 days before they got back home. And sure enough, as they were walking through the neighborhood, they could see total disaster. In fact, everyone's field had been absolutely destroyed except theirs. Well, what had happened? The neighbors had done as they said. They had chased the crows away from their fields. And as they predicted, all of the crows gathered at the brothers' field. But unbeknownst to everyone, in addition to the crows, there was another danger, an unseen danger. Throughout the entire region, there was an infestation of worms. And so, there's one thing that the crows like better than the corn, and that's the worms. Now, when they got to the brothers' field, they saw all these delicious, succulent worms there, and nobody to chase them away. They ate every single worm. They had no more room for dessert. They left the corn alone. The neighbors, the worms, completely destroyed their crop. Well, now, the brother and his wife, they had something to live on for the next year. But suppose that they hadn't. Suppose that the crows had destroyed the corn. Would that have meant that they weren't being blessed by Jehovah? Well, of course. They had just had a wonderful blessing from Jehovah. The happiness of attending that convention. And that made them rich. They were very happy coming back from the convention, even though they thought that nothing was going to be left. So the point is that Jehovah doesn't necessarily bless us in a material way, but He does bless us with a happy life. Now, when we make arrangements in our schedule, in our personal life, to serve Jehovah, very often we don't even suffer in a material way. As I was thinking about that brother we were talking about, the one who cut down his work from 50 hours to 20, I wonder to what extent he's really had to reduce his lifestyle. Sometimes when you work a lot, you pay a lot of taxes. And when you work less, you're in a smaller tax bracket, and you find that you're just giving a little less to the government, and what you actually have left to live on is not that much different. This summer we were up to Calgary, Canada, for a district convention, and I was talking to a brother there. That brother had a very important job as the administrator of a very important company. And he said that 15 years ago he took early retirement because he wanted to pioneer. Now, his boss told him, listen, if you take early retirement, you are only going to get 30% of your present salary. You're going to take a 70% loss. The brother said, I'll take it. What's important to me, I want to pioneer. I want to spend my full time serving my God. And so he accepted this 70% reduction in pay. And for the last 15 years, he's been a pioneer. He said, you know what? We have made very, very few adjustments in our lifestyle. He says we were paying so very much in taxes. So now he's got his lifestyle, he's got the pioneer service, he and his wife are truly happy people. So can you feel blessed by Jehovah if you lose your job? You can. You can retain your happiness. If you live in a divided household, if you come down with a serious illness, yes, you can count your blessings. You can count the many ways in which Jehovah is making you happy. I was talking to a sister at a special assembly day just a couple of months ago, an elderly sister, and she said, I can't believe how many things I don't have to be worried about because I'm in the truth. She was looking at war looming, the economy, all these problems, illnesses, pestilences, unknown origins, and so on. And she says, I don't really have to worry about these things because I am in the truth. And to her, and she looked at all of these problems, all of these negatives, and she still felt blessed. So it's a matter of counting our blessings and seeing that Jehovah blesses his faithful servants every single day. Now, that text that we read in 1 Timothy 6, it said that we should be rich in fine works, and it also said that we should be ready to share. In other words, cultivate a generous spirit. And this is true whether we have little or much of this world's goods. Now in the country of Brazil, there was a young brother named Marcio, and he received the marvelous privilege of being invited to serve at Bethel in Brazil. Now he had to pay his way there. It was a 3-day bus trip, and he didn't have enough liquid cash for the bus ticket, so Marcio sold just about everything that he had. He turned it into cash, he bought his ticket, and he had a little bit of money left over that he was going to be able to use once he got to Bethel to get settled. Well, on the 3rd day of the bus trip, the bus was surrounded by armed robbers, which is quite the norm down in those countries. They made everybody get out of the bus, everybody was to line up, and then they completely stripped the passengers of anything of value. Their watches, their pens, their money, anything of value, their rings, everything went. Well, of course, for Marcio, most of what he had gone already because he sold everything to get to Bethel. He didn't have his wallet, his money in his wallet. When the robbers got to Marcio, they opened up his briefcase. They saw his Bible sitting on top. And for some reason, they closed the briefcase and touched nothing. So now when the passengers were finally allowed to get back on the bus, and the bus arrived at the next stop, it was supposed to be a meal stop. And the passengers were very hungry. Being robbed of everything you own, it tends to make you that way. But they had no money for food. Now, obviously, for good of reason, all of these people are working full time, and they will soon earn back whatever it was that they got stolen. But here I am, a volunteer. I'm going to Bethel. I'm going to have just a very small allowance to pay for my toothpaste and my shoe polish. But he didn't do it that way. These people were hungry. And so he took the money out of his wallet and he bought food for the entire bus group. Well, a great witness was given to the people in that bus. And do you really think, brothers, that a man like that will ever really suffer, even materially? Generous people don't, do they? We tend to give to generous people. It warms our heart to see people who give of themselves, who give of their funds, and so we give to them. And we think of others who are generous in their giving. Think of those who support the regional building committees as volunteers for Kingdom Hall construction. And this is a great sacrifice, because some of them go from one project to another project to another project. And during the busy season, they may not have a moment's peace. I remember my wife and I were having supper with a friend of ours and his wife and his daughter, 14-year-old daughter. He was on the regional building committee. It was a Saturday night, and at 8 o'clock at night, he gets a phone call. We're building a Kingdom Hall 200 miles away. And the brother who was supposed to help us with the gyprock, he couldn't make it. Would you be able to come? That brother was out of his chair like a shot. And he drove the 200 miles. He worked all night long to help with that project. And that's the case with people who are volunteers with regional building committees. Sometimes, they're on a vacation. Maybe another couple will say, how about if you go on a cruise with us? How about if you go on a vacation with us? We'd love to. We really need a vacation. Then they get a phone call. We have a Kingdom Hall project. We really need you. Can you help us out? They put aside their vacation plans. And that doesn't just involve the brother. It involves his wife and maybe his children as well. All of these people are being unselfish. Why? Because of the love of Jehovah. Now, are people like that sometimes inconvenienced financially? Yes. Sometimes they might have in mind to do a little bit of extra secular work. Maybe the couch in the basement needs to be replaced or something. Maybe the armchair, you can just feel the springs coming up every time you sit down. And it's nice to have an armchair that didn't do that. But they set those things aside. They say, we'll work on that later because we have a Kingdom Hall to build. And Jehovah blesses them. And it's a funny thing. As much as they turn down extra work, they're never that far behind financially. And sometimes I've had brothers tell me, I really didn't know where the money was going to come from. I don't know how we did it, but we managed to pay all of our bills. And they'd say, look, on paper it doesn't work. On paper you can't make ends meet. But somehow we always had enough to care for our responsibilities. Well, people like that are blessed because they put kingdom interests first. It doesn't mean that Jehovah will bless them with luxury, but he'll always make sure that they have what is necessary. Only if we put kingdom interests first in our life does Jesus' promise apply, and all of these necessary things will be added to you. Now, imagine how the joy that individuals feel multiplies when you find entire families doing Jehovah's will. Entire families putting kingdom interests first. We're reminded of Joshua and the very declarative statement that he made, unambiguous statement, recorded at Joshua chapter 24. Joshua chapter 24 in verse 15. And here, Joshua is recognizing that the Israelites are free moral agents. They have a choice to make whom they're going to serve, whether Jehovah or someone else. But then notice the very last sentence. Joshua says to them, "But as for me and my household, we shall serve Jehovah." Jehovah blesses parents when they take that very firm position. Now, it doesn't mean that all of the children are going to stay in the truth, because children too are free moral agents, but they are more likely to stay in the truth when we take this firm approach. We are going to serve Jehovah in this household. And when you talk to pioneers, we have so many Bethelites, young men at Bethel, and you get talking to them and ask them what they appreciated about their parents, what they appreciated about their upbringing. So often, the Bethelites will say, "What I appreciate about Mom and Dad, we always knew when family study was. Meeting nights, we always knew that we were going to the meeting. It was never a question. Saturday and Sunday, we knew we were going out to field service. And we knew that there was no sense coming home and saying, 'Mom, I've got a little extra homework. I want to stay home from the meeting tonight.' She'd say, 'Well, you'll have to stay up after the meeting, or you'll have to do it before the meeting, but you're going to the meeting.'" And they appreciated that, because the parents were really saying, in effect, "In this house, we shall serve Jehovah." They realized that they had no choice, and they appreciated that. A number of years ago in Quebec, we made the acquaintance of a young man who later married an American sister, both very whole-souled in their service to Jehovah. And where we first ran into them as a married couple, the society had sent them to some islands out in the North Atlantic, a string of islands, where there were no witnesses at all. And they and another couple, they were the only witnesses on this island. Now when we arrived to serve the congregation, well, the congregation was the two special pioneer couples. When we arrived to serve the congregation, after working the territory for a week, we had one couple attend the public meeting that Sunday. That's all. 6 months later, we returned, and there were 30 people packed in their little living room attending the meeting on Sunday. Now, some of those people were visitors, but a number of them were not. A number of them were local people. Well, 6 months after that, there were no visitors this time, and there were 30 people attending the meetings. Now, this was just these two were just young couples, and they were bringing all of these people to a knowledge of the truth. And for them, one of the outstanding characteristics, it didn't matter to them when somebody said they wanted a Bible study. It could be Saturday night, it could be at midnight, it could be early in the morning. It didn't matter to them. They would put aside every personal project to study with those people. Well, later on, they had a family. And the brother, he was a very qualified man. They moved to the city of Montreal. He got into a very good business, made a little money, bought a beautiful home, and set himself up. His wife, his children grew up with every comfort. But when the kids got to be 14 and 15 years of age, Mom and Dad decided that it was time to teach the kids a little bit about the spirit of self-sacrifice. Because you see, they always had the spirit of the truth burning in their hearts. So, they called a family meeting, boys sitting there on the couch, Mom and Dad, and they said, well, we've made a decision. We're selling everything and moving to the Dominican Republic to serve with the need is greater. Now the boys, 14 and 15 years of age, they were not happy campers. They didn't want to go. They had a very comfortable life. They had some very nice toys, which they knew they couldn't bring to the Dominican Republic. They had their friends. They just wanted to maintain, they wanted to be in the truth, but they didn't want to have to make a sacrifice. And having a good free communication with their mom and dad, they let them know, we do not want to go. And mom and dad said, well, that's too bad because we've sold everything and we're going. Well, they passed through Bethel on their way down, and the brother told me, he says, I'm a little bit worried about my boys. I said, don't worry about them, they're teenagers. Teenagers are flexible. They'll complain a bit, but they're flexible. Those teenagers got down to Dominican Republic, and it was just marvelous to see how they took to the local culture. They both knew English and French, and within 6 months they were speaking Spanish without an accent. And one started learning Haitian Creole because there were a lot of Haitians over there. When they were 20 and 21 years of age, which they are now, there was a kingdom hall that was needed. And they needed to build a new kingdom hall in a certain area, but nobody was available to supervise the project. So the branch called these two young men in, 20 and 21 years old. They said, well, you're all we've got, and we are going to put you in charge of the building of this kingdom hall. Those two boys, 20 and 21 years old, became the regional building committee for the building of this kingdom hall. The brothers tell me that they built a magnificent kingdom hall. Those boys have both brought a number of people into the truth. And we had dinner with the family when we were in Dominican Republic, and so I asked the boys, and so, your toys and home? They said, what home? This is home. We don't want to go back. All because Mom and Dad insisted, as for us and our household, we shall serve Jehovah. Well, what about the joy that we experience as members of a congregation? I don't know if you're like me, but how often do I go to a meeting and I am so dead tired? And I return from the meeting, I'm so refreshed. Why? Well, it's my brothers and sisters. Maybe it's a comment that someone made. Maybe it was an interesting demonstration. Maybe it was just the faithfulness of somebody who came into the hall on crutches or something, and you saw what effort that person had put into attending meetings, and it made you feel so good to be part of this organization. The circuit overseer. And we have the circuit overseers visit at Bethel, in our congregations, and we look forward to the circuit overseers visit. And we try to get on the list to work with the circuit overseer. My wife and I tried to get on the list to work with our circuit overseer last time. It was all filled up. Couldn't make it. No room for us. We were disappointed. We appreciate working with the circuit overseer. There are so many blessings that we have as part of Jehovah's organization. Think about the theocratic education that we receive. Think about the fact when you go to the theocratic ministry school and you hold that book in your hand, benefiting from theocratic ministry school education. They're studying the same book in Gabon. They're studying the same book in Senegal and in Santiago de Chile and in Mexico. The same education all over the world. And it doesn't matter whether you're meeting under a tree or in a palatial kingdom hall. You are benefiting from the same education. And what a difference it makes. Did you notice how well that young brother handled himself? He was up here. He said that he joined the school when he was 5 years old. A very fluent young man. Not like so many 17-year-olds that you hear. You go to McDonald's and you can hardly understand a word they're telling you over the counter. And now here's a young man who's really fluent. Because the theocratic ministry school has benefited him. Have you joined the school? Especially now that we don't get our counsel in front of everybody. Doesn't that take a little pressure off us? Why don't we just overcome that fear that we have and join the school? A friend of mine in Quebec, he joined the school when it first started back in 1943. He wasn't a very outgoing man and quite short of stature. He was a little bit nervous about how this was going to work, but he received his first assignment in 1943, And he practiced and practiced and practiced and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed until he had that assignment backwards and forwards. The night for the school arrived. He got up on the platform, gripped the speaker stand, looked out at the audience, and froze. School overseer was sitting in the front row, waiting for him to open his mouth. Nothing happened. 3 minutes went by. 5 minutes went by. The bell rang. Saved by the bell. 2 brothers had to get up on the platform, pry his finger off the speaker stand, and escort the poor brother off the platform. Now, if you had been that brother, would you have viewed this school as a blessing from God? Would you have known to count your blessings? Our brother did. And he said, I am going to get a blessing. Like Jacob wrestling with that angel, I am not going to let you go until you first bless me. And so he accepted a second assignment. And he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed until he had that assignment backwards and forwards. And this time, when he got up on the platform, he did not freeze. He fainted dead away. Now it was getting worse, because the last time it took 2 brothers to get him off the platform. Now it took 4 brothers to get him off the platform, 2 of his legs and 2 of his arms. If you had been carted unceremoniously from the platform, would you have recognized the blessing if it bit you on the nose? My brother did. He realized that this was something important that he was going to have to conquer. And so he accepted a third assignment. And he practiced and rehearsed as before, and he got through the entire talk. Now, as soon as it was over, he headed out the side door and threw up, and it was a start. It was a start. Well, not a very happy start to things. But that brother went on. He became an assembly overseer. He came on to give district convention talks. He passed away just this past summer. A very happy, satisfied man. Very well used by Jehovah. That man recognized lessons. And he recognized how Jehovah's organization was grooming him and helping him. And he appreciated that. And so Jehovah was giving him the means to be a happy man. And he says, yes, I want it. And he reached out for it. And he was willing, yes, to appear a little foolish at times in order to get the blessing that he wanted. How joyful we can be, how we can rejoice that we are part of such an organization. Well, our brothers in other lands, they appreciate their meetings. They appreciate being able to have a place to meet. We're trying to arrange for congregations with needs, areas with needs, to have kingdom halls to meet in. There are many countries where there's only 1 or 2 kingdom halls, or even no kingdom halls in the entire country. I can think of a country, I won't say where, with 86,000 publishers, and I don't think they have 1 kingdom hall in the whole country. Our brothers meet out in the open in private homes. They jam into small rooms. They try to rent places if they're available. And so what a blessing it is that we now have these international servants who are like the regional building committees, but they go out to foreign countries and they help the brothers to build kingdom halls. They use local materials. Sometimes it's a long and arduous project. We were in the country of Haiti, and a young brother, just a young man, 20 years old, he was going off to help build a kingdom hall in the bush in Haiti. And I said, well, where are you going to be staying? He said, well, we don't know yet. We're there to build a kingdom hall. And you just thank Jehovah that he has raised up so many willing young people today who are interested in doing this kind of thing. And friends, we should never, ever take a negative view of our young people, or what our young people are capable of doing, or the sacrifices that our young people are making. Yesterday I was at the ministerial training school, And many of you older brothers, you remember when you had to take 1 month leave of absence to go to the Kingdom Ministry School. Those young brothers have to take 2 months leave of absence from their job to attend the ministerial training school. And they're doing it. So, if ever you wonder when you think about our youth, where is the faith? Or when the Son of Man arrives, will he really find the faith in the world? We can say that our young brothers and our young sisters are showing every bit as much faith as what our brothers 40, 50, and 60 years ago have shown. And this reminds us of the joy that we have as members of Jehovah's organization, and how we enjoy protection from Jehovah as a people. Not as individuals always, no. If you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, you may lose your life. But we do rejoice that as a people, we do experience the protection of Jehovah. Think about our brothers and sisters in the 30s. Think about our brothers in Germany. Now, Hitler was so intent upon eradicating Jehovah's Witnesses from Germany that he appointed a special Gestapo unit just to counter Jehovah's Witnesses. And they were very effective. By the end of the war, they had arrested 6,262 witnesses. And a former government officer had this to say. He said, no other group of prisoners was exposed to the sadism of the SS in such a fashion as the Bible students were. And the historian Christine King said, only against the witnesses was the government unsuccessful. In May of 1945, the Jehovah's Witness movement was still alive, whilst Hitler's National Socialism was not. And she adds, no compromises were made. Our brothers were released from the camps rejoicing. They were happy when they went in, they were happy while they were interned, and they were happy when they left. And so we can say that they were enjoying Jehovah's blessing even when they were suffering. Now, how was it that they were able to keep their joy? Why was it that they were so happy when they were leaving the camps, when so many others who were interned were so miserable? And we talk to them sometimes. In New York City, there are many who used to be interned in these camps, and you get talking to them. They are so bitter. It's been 60 years, and they're still bitter. And yet our brothers are not. Why? Our brothers recognized a blessing from Jehovah when they saw one. For example, suppose that someone found a piece of bread. They would look at that piece of bread and they would say, thank you, Jehovah. What a blessing. We're going to be able to take this piece of bread and share it with our older ones, and that will give them strength, and maybe they'll be able to survive this trauma. Others who were not Jehovah's people would find the same piece of bread. And they would hold it up and they would say, where is the God? Where is he? Look, I am suffering and all that I have is this miserable piece of bread. They both saw the same thing, but they didn't do it in the same way. One saw it as a blessing from Jehovah. The other saw it as proof that God did not exist. Who left the camps rejoicing? It was our brothers. And even though some of our brothers who were interned, they did have to endure some traumatic experiences, even emotionally, they have been protected mentally far better than those who did not have belief in Jehovah. When the camps were being emptied, the Nazis, of course, had accumulated many treasures. They had stolen from people. Now they wanted to cart these treasures off with them. And so they knew that Jehovah's Witnesses could be trusted, and so they gave the witnesses wheelbarrows, and they piled all of these treasures in the wheelbarrows, and they forced our weakened brothers to push the wheelbarrows laden with treasure. Our brothers said, thank you, Jehovah. What a blessing. Well, how could that be a blessing? There were older ones there who were too weak to walk. And if you couldn't walk, and if you fell by the wayside, you were shot instantly. So the brothers were able to put the older ones on the wheelbarrows and then push the treasure and the older ones along. And not one brother who was on the death march lost his life. So the brothers viewed this not as extra work, not as something that was beyond their limits, beyond their force, but as a blessing from Jehovah. So the question is, do we really recognize Jehovah's blessing? If you've had your breakfast and you had a little sandwich for lunch, what can you ask for more than that? Can you say that Jehovah hasn't blessed you? If you're going to have something for supper, you might not go to the fanciest restaurant in Portland or in Eugene, but if you have something for supper, can you say that you have not been blessed by Jehovah? Brothers, we have to stop thinking about the blessing of Jehovah in terms of material things. Jehovah is not materialistic. As far as he's concerned, as long as we have our bread and our water, our food for the day, but we have an abundance of spiritual food, we are being abundantly blessed. And if we look at it that way, it helps us to understand that our brothers in Africa, our brothers in South America, they're being blessed by Jehovah. No, they don't have the best in food and drink. They don't have the best of clothes to put on their back. They don't have the best of shelter. They have, for the most part, enough. In some cases, just enough. In some cases, they are not left entirely. But they do have an abundance of spiritual food. And the fact that our literature is being translated into 370 languages today is the proof that Jehovah has not neglected our brothers there, but that he is blessing them in the most meaningful way possible. So Jehovah will not let us starve if we put kingdom interests first. And since none of us here are starving, then we are the proof of those words. The uncertain economy means that we may have to cut back on luxuries, but it doesn't mean that we're going to starve to death. If we keep seeking the kingdom first, then the necessary things, not necessarily the ancillary things, but the necessary things will be added to us. You know, Shakespeare wrote a play called Henry VIII. It was really quite interesting. It featured the Archbishop of Canterbury. As you know, Henry VIII wanted a divorce. The Catholic Church wouldn't grant him one, so he decided to start his own religion, the Church of England. He had the Archbishop of Canterbury there, and he asked the Archbishop to change the rules. And basically it was to change the rules to suit Henry. Now the Archbishop wasn't very happy with this. He didn't want to change the rules of the church just to please the king. But he got thinking about it, and he said, well, if I don't go along with it, he's my boss, and if I don't do what the boss wants, then maybe I'll lose my job. Reminds us maybe if we are asked to work 50, 60 hours a week, and we say, well, it's my job, I'll miss all my meetings, but it's my job, it's my boss, and I have to please my boss, because if I don't, I'm going to starve to death. So, against his own better judgment, the Archbishop began changing rules. And Henry wanted this, and he would do that for Henry. And then Henry wanted that, and he would do that for Henry. Destroying his conscience all the while. Finally, Henry got tired of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he was carted off to the Tower of London. And as he was being taken away in the play, the Archbishop said, if I had served my God with half the zeal I served my king, he would not, in mine age, have left me naked before my enemies. It's something to think about, isn't it? Sometimes our employer may ask us to do all kinds of things, to make all kinds of compromises. And we might think, well, I need my job. I can't risk losing my job. I'll do this. I'll do that. But what will the employer do when it's time to lay people off? Will he leave us naked before our enemies? Sometimes we can make so many compromises, and our conscience will just kill us for it because we know that it's just not the best. You don't miss meetings and we don't miss conventions and all that sort of thing. But then when it comes time to be laid off, we're laid off just the same. And if we serve our God with half the zeal we serve our boss, we can be sure that Jehovah will not, in our age, leave us naked before our enemies. We are convinced that a life of service to Jehovah is the happiest, most joyful, most satisfying life possible. So, brothers, may we never slack our hands. The harder we work, the more we sacrifice, the happier we will be. The more we give, the richer we will be. And here's one other thing. Jehovah will add no penny